Hi BookTube, it's Amy. I'm here for another Friday Reads. I had a couple of high points and one low point in my reading week. So I think I'm going to start with the high points. Yesterday I read Jonathan Van Ness's new book, Over the Top, A Raw Journey of Self-Love. It's his new memoir, and I got the hardcover instead of the paperback just because of the cover, which I think is too funny. So if you don't know who Jonathan Van Ness is, he is the hairstylist on Netflix's reboot of the show Queer Eye. And it's about a group of men who go about and give people makeovers, not only physical makeovers, but they help them through personal issues and do over their house and teach them to cook. And of course Jonathan does the hair, and he is just a flamboyant, and he seems like a very loving person, and he's one of my favorite on the show. And so when his when his book came out, I knew that I had to read it. And the only disappointing part about it is that it was too short and there were no pictures in the center, which I like to see in a memoir or biography. So that was disappointing, no pictures, and it was too short. But other than that, it was funny. It made me almost cry a bit. And it's something I'd really recommend if you like Queer Eye, or if you're just looking for a funny memoir to read. He does talk a lot about his struggles, though. He's HIV positive. He grew up queer in a small town in the United States. He had some issues with drug addiction, and it's just a really great book. And you wouldn't know it seeing him on the show. He's such a positive person who seems to love on everybody. You wouldn't know that he had struggled with so much. So I really enjoyed that. And then I've also been reading on my Kindle. I'm going to hold up the Kindle, although there's not much to see here. Perhaps I'll see if I can show you the cover of this book. Oh, actually it doesn't show you much. I was going to say, here's the cover, but it's just a blank cover. But I've been reading Tommy and Grizel by J.M.Barrie, which is the sequel to Sentimental Tommy that I read a month or so ago. And on Kindle, the sequel was free, and I'm quite enjoying it so far. Tommy is all grown up, and he's become a famous writer, and his sister Elspeth still looks up to him as, you know, the perfect man, almost as a god who can do no wrong. And Tommy is still a little bit taken with Grizel, and he finds himself back in Thrums, back in this Scottish town. He is, lauded and welcomed back as the famous writer who has done great things. And, the house where he grew up as a child is now sort of this tourist attraction. But he comes back, and there is Grizel, still unmarried, and she's looking at him thinking, I don't believe a word he says. He's not noble. He's not good. And she wants to like him, but every time she's almost taken in by him, every time she almost says, I love him. He's the most amazing man. I'd like to marry him. He goes and he does something that pisses her off, that gives her a bad opinion of him. There is this ridiculous scene where he has just come back and they go out for a walk, and he pretends that he has twisted his ankle. And so he puts on this great show hoping to get her pity, and he limps home, and the doctor comes to see him. But before the doctor can get there, he says to himself, oh, she's going to find out that I lied. Everyone's going to know that I was, over-exaggerating this twisted ankle. And so he goes and he does damage to his ankle to the point where it's all swollen, and he has to stay off it, and he's in great pain to the point where he's fainting. And his sister and the doctor and everybody are, fussing over him. And Grizel doesn't believe it because she caught on that he was faking. And so she treats him poorly until she realizes that, oh my goodness, his ankle is all swelled up. But something's wrong because it's the wrong ankle. He did damage to the wrong ankle and she knows it. And so then he has to explain. And she just thinks that he's the most absurd person that she's ever encountered. But then he goes and he does something that turns her heart towards him, and where I'm at, they've declared their love for each other, but Tommy isn't so sure whether he's really in love with Grizel, because he doesn't know what real love is like, and he's not sure if he's capable of this real love that he's read about. So I'm excited to read on, although I'm not sure if I'm actually going to finish it in this Kindle edition or whether I'm going to set it aside and wait until my hardback arrives. I went on Books, and it was in US dollars, but I think it came out to about 35 or 40 Canadian dollars with the cost of the book and the shipping. I got a copy of this book in the hardback from around 1900, and it's actually the matching edition that goes with my copy of Sentimental Tommy, so I'll have that nice set on the shelf there. And Book said this one was in very good condition, so that's promising, and I'm hoping that it will be a beautiful book that I can enjoy. On the topic of J.M.Barrie though, I didn't scream, and I was alone in the basement at the bookshop, Black Squirrel Books, but all of a sudden I saw this book out of the corner of my eye on a stack on the floor, and I said to myself, well, that's kind of a pretty cover, it looks old, I wonder what that is. And then I got closer and I saw a window in Thrums, which is the title, and I said, Thrums, and then I picked it up and I opened it up. I couldn't read the spine because it's too faded, but I picked it up and I opened it up and I saw this, Window in Thrums, Barrie. And I said, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And thank goodness I was alone in the basement of the bookshop, or I would have been getting some strange looks. But I nearly shrieked in joy in the basement of this bookshop because I'd found A Window in Thrums by J.M.Barrie in this beautiful edition, and I tend to freak out anytime I see J.M.Barrie in an old edition, especially, of course I'm not finding a first edition of Peter Pan in some basement somewhere, but I am finding older editions of these other works. And this was quite interesting too, because someone has written in the front of this book, December 20th, 02. And you think 02, 2002, and then I realized, no, this is written in fountain pen, and that is December 20th, 1902. And I believe somewhere in here it says, here we go at the front, copyright 1899. But I'm not sure whether that's the plate here or whether it's the book itself. There doesn't seem to be any copyright date in here, but we can guess it's from about 1900, from about the turn of the 20th century. And so I'm really pleased with this, and I don't know much about it. It's a very short, tiny work. It's funny because it's about the size of my Kindle here. But I'm quite pleased to get it. And it does seem to be largely that Scottish dialect that I find so difficult and cumbersome to read. It's some mighty, and that's mighty spelt with a CH, mighty grand kind of stalkin'. I never heard aught in this tune. Nah, there's nobody in Thrums at wears hose. So I can only guess if they're talking about their wardrobe, so I'm assuming they're talking about stockings, pantyhose. I would assume they're talking about a woman's attire. And there's this picture of this old lady here, Jess. So I will read this sometime soon, maybe in the next week, and we'll see if I'm still as ecstatic to have found it, whether the story is any good or not. It will certainly make a great addition to my growing collection of J.M.Barrie novels. So I have The Little Minister, which is the first vintage J.M.Barrie I picked up. I have Sentimental Tommy, I have Lady Nicotine, and I have Margaret Ogilvy, which is the work about J.M.Barrie's mother. If you've read any of these, be sure to let me know what you think of J.M.Barrie in the comments below. So enough about the wonderful side of my reading week. I read The Secrets We Kept by Lara Prescott, which is a fairly new release, I believe. It was at the bookshop, and let me just check the publication date here to make sure I'm not talking about something that's ancient. I was right, it is published in 2019. And I really wanted to like this one. It sounded thrilling. It was about two secretaries who become spies during the Cold War. They are CIA typists, and because they are women, because they are charming, they are sent off on missions to collect packages. And we have Irina, who has Russian heritage. She herself was born in the United States, but her parents, or rather her mother, escaped from Russia. Unfortunately, her father was left behind, and we find out that he has actually died shortly after her mother escaped. And her mother was pregnant at the time, and so Irina was born in the United States. And she is hired on as a typist at the CIA, even though she's not really a great typist. She is very slow. She comments on how she's not very pretty, or at least the other typists do, so she wasn't hired for that reason. She's not very pretty. She's not a great typist. She wasn't hired for her skill, but the other typists, or to catch on, she's got a Russian-sounding name. They must want her for something else. And while she's working there as this typist and this spy at night, she trains with a man that she has a romantic affair with, and she meets Sally, who is a fellow, she works front desk, but that's also not what she really does. She's a fellow spy going on missions as well. She's described as, I think they describe her as a black widow of sorts. She's, out there using her beauty to get secrets. But Irina and Sally develop this very close friendship that turns into a budding romance. And when I realized the direction it was going in, I was hoping we were going to get more of that. But unfortunately, the whole novel is not very good. We have massive time jumps. We have several perspectives. At first, I was having difficulty figuring out who was narrating, because we get the perspective of sort of this mass of typists. I guess, all the typists speaking as one. We have Irina's perspective. Occasionally, we have Sally's perspective. And then we have Olga's perspective, because we have this parallel story of the mistress of Boris Pasternak, who is the inspiration for Lara in Dr. Zhivago. We have that plot line with Boris Pasternak writing Dr. Zhivago and trying to smuggle the novel out of the country because the Soviet government refuses to publish it. And I felt as though the author really wanted to tell that story, the story of Boris Pasternak's mistress, but decided to make it more complex with the spies who are associated with helping to smuggle that novel out. But even then, we don't get much detail on that story. Rather, it's fragmented moments where we jump into, say, Irina's life in one segment, and we get some backstory. And just when we think we're getting to know the character, we completely shifted ahead, and the author's talking about something else. So we never really understand, Irina's backstory. Apart from some details about her family, we don't understand much about her motivations, about why she wanted to be a spy, about whether or not she was in love with this man, about her true feelings towards Sally. It's like one minute we think we're getting some detail about her emotional well-being, and the next we're off somewhere else, and that moment has passed. And so it just wasn't really very interesting to read because we never do more than brush the surface of these characters, which I guess isn't a bad thing if you're just looking for a fun story, but it was even hard to just follow the story because we're not sure what really happens at all. Sally makes a decision that pits her against everyone else, and we never understand fully why, apart from the fact that she was afraid of being outed. We get these vague notions of what may have happened to the characters in the end, but everything is vague and unknown, and I just wasn't very satisfied with the story. I was hoping to get more about what it was like to be a spy. Perhaps, even more about the process of smuggling this novel out, as opposed to just vague scenes. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. So that's what I've been reading. But as I said, I did go to Black Squirrel Books and I got Window in Thrums. And I had some store credit left over, so I picked up a few more books as well. I got Framley Parsonage by Trollope in this beautiful Everyman's Library edition. The dust jacket is quite battered, but it is always nice to find an Everyman's Library edition with the dust jacket still intact. And this was $5. I don't know much about Framley Parsonage, but I have heard that it's good. It's actually one that someone recommended to me before I had read any Trollope, and I was asking about somewhere to start. So I will be reading this at some point, perhaps next month, as it is October, and I do intend to read some Victorian novels in October. Just not, I'm not putting together a formal TBR because I know I won't keep to it. And this appears to be a 1950 reprinting, so that's very nice. And then I picked up for $7 North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. I've seen the BBC miniseries, but I've never read the book. And so it's about a woman who, because of financial situation, I believe, is forced to move into, not a financial situation. Her father has sort of given up the church, which I guess would cause a financial situation. Her father leaves the church in a crisis of conscience, and that is how she finds herself in this industrial town where she falls in love with the local owner of, I believe it's a mill, if I recall correctly. I think they're making fabrics or linens of some sort. I should read the back of the book. God, it's been a while since I saw the miniseries. Yes, local mill worker. She becomes aware of the poverty and suffering, and she develops a passionate sense of social justice. And she has a tempestuous relationship with the mill owner and self-made man, John Thornton. And they have some misunderstandings and eventually fall in love, of course, and I think they marry at the end. But yesterday I made plans to buddy read this with Janelle from All the World's a Page, so we're going to start this on October 4th, and so I guess that would be my first Victober read of sorts. I had watched a bunch of people's Victober TBR, so that's what took me to the bookstore. I was thinking that yes, I'd like to read some Elizabeth Gaskell, so I got North and South, but I also got Mary Barton, which it says it's set in Manchester in the 1840s during a period of industrial unrest and extreme deprivation. It depicts the effects of economic and physical hardship upon the city's working class community, paralleling the novel's treatment of the relationship between masters and men. The suffering of the poor and the workman's angry response is the story of Mary herself, a factory worker's daughter who attracts the attention of the mill owner's son. She becomes caught up in the violence of class conflicts when a brutal murder forces her to confront her true feelings and allegiances. So, a second book about a mill owner and a romance and social and economic justice. So that should be interesting as well. I've heard good things. Now here is the book that I'm most excited about, and this is not from Black Squirrel Books. This is from Amazon. It actually came out a couple of months ago, but I hadn't bought it yet. I was sort of waiting for the right moment when I wanted to read it, and now I am in the mood. So if you've been following my channel for a long time, you'll know that I love Canadian author Hugh MacLennan. He is a classic NCAN Lit, and I have read all of his published novels, or I had read all of his published novels. This year, an unpublished novel, Man Should Rejoice, emerged in a critical edition from the University of Ottawa Press. It's a novel he completed in 1937, unpublished until now, and it's about a man struggling with the ideological difficulties of the 1930s, I guess. I'm not sure much about the plot. I do recall reading about this in a biography of Hugh MacLennan several years back. But I will read this, and I will probably do a full review of it later in the next few weeks. Let me know what you're reading this weekend.